The law is supposed to be a pillar of logic, a majestic framework that separates civilization from chaos. But sometimes that pillar is holding up a clown car. Deep within the legal codes of the United States, buried under layers of serious statutes about taxes and property rights, are laws so breathtakingly strange, so wonderfully pointless, they feel like they were written on a dare. We're not just talking about outdated rules, we're talking about pure, unadulterated legislative nonsense. Get ready to question everything you thought you knew about common sense as we begin our tour of the 50 dumbest laws in America. 1. In Ohio, it is illegal to get a fish drunk. This is devastating news for anyone who is planning a sophisticated underwater wine tasting for their goldfish. While the original intent was likely tied to preventing the pollution of waterways with alcohol, the specific wording creates a hilarious mental image of a tiny fish warden administering a breathalyzer to a belligerently drunk carp. It also raises the critical question, what's the legal limit for a largemouth bass, and does it know when to say when? 2. In Kentucky, it's illegal to carry an ice cream cone in your back pocket. Now, this sounds like a classic case of government overreach targeting poor fashion choices. But this law is actually a brilliant old-school security measure. Back in the day, horse thieves would put a scoop of ice cream in their pocket. The horse would follow them, licking the cone, allowing the thief to lead it away without ever touching it. So, what seems like a dumb law was actually a 19th century anti-theft device for equines. 3. In Connecticut, a pickle isn't legally a pickle unless it bounces. This isn't a joke. In 1948, 2 pickle packers were arrested for selling pickles that were unfit for human consumption. To prove it in court, a state official declared that a real, properly pickled cucumber would, when dropped from the height of 1 foot, bounce. Theirs just splatted. The bouncing pickle test became legendary, a symbol of quality control and a victory for pickle lovers everywhere. 4. Some laws seem designed to protect us from very specific sensory assaults. In Nebraska, a barber is forbidden from eating onions between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. This isn't a suggestion for good customer service. It's a legally mandated rule of professional hygiene. It paints a vivid picture of a time when the biggest threat during a haircut wasn't a slip of the scissors, but the overwhelming power of your barber's lunch wafting over you as he leaned in for a close shave. 5. In Alaska, it is against the law to whisper in someone's ear while they are moose hunting. This sounds like a solution to a problem that absolutely no one has ever had. But think about it for a second. You're in the silent wilderness, tracking a 200-pound animal, your focus absolute. The last thing you need is your buddy leaning in to ask if you remembered to pack the Doritos. It's less about secrecy and more about not startling someone holding a high-powered rifle in the middle of nowhere. 6. In South Dakota, it is illegal to fall asleep in a cheese factory. This law is a beautiful intersection of public safety and dairy justice. On one hand, it's obviously dangerous to be unconscious around heavy machinery. On the other, one can only imagine the sheer disrespect of dozing off in the presence of a perfectly aged cheddar. It's an affront to the cheesemakers, the cows, and the very spirit of Wisconsin's greatest rival. Stay awake or buy your cheese somewhere else. 7. In Nevada, it remains illegal to ride a camel on the highway. This law dates back to a bizarre chapter in American history when the U.S. Army experimented with a camel course for desert transport before the Civil War. When the project was abandoned, the camels were sold off or just released into the wild. They became such a nuisance to horse-drawn traffic that Nevada had to explicitly ban them from public roads. The West was much, much weirder than the movies let on. 8. In Oklahoma, a landlocked state hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean, it is illegal to go whaling. Let that sink in. Someone at some point sat down in the Oklahoma State Legislature and thought, we need to get ahead of this looming whale problem. This is a spectacular example of what's called model legislation, where lawmakers just copy and paste laws from other states without considering if they make any sense whatsoever in their own. Oklahoma is safe from Moby Dick, and all it took was a little legislative absurdity. 9. In Blythe, California, a person must own at least 2 cows to be legally permitted to wear cowboy boots in public. This is the ultimate form of agricultural gatekeeping. It's a direct shot at all the city slickers who think throwing on a pair of Laquais boots makes them a rugged frontiersman. The message from Blythe is clear. Cowboy is not a fashion statement, it's a profession. If you want the boots, you better have the beef to back it up. 10. In Texas, it is illegal to milk another person's cow. On the surface, this law seems to fall into the no kidding category, right alongside don't steal your neighbor's car. But the fact that it had to be formally written into the penal code implies that unauthorized cow milking was a genuine, recurring problem. It paints a vivid picture of a time when the most valuable asset you had was your livestock, and your neighbor might just be a dairy-craving outlaw. 11. How do you get thrown out of church in Alabama? It's easier than you might think, and it involves bad comedy. An old law in the books makes it illegal to wear a fake mustache in church if it causes laughter. The law isn't targeting piety or reverence. It's a precision strike against the one guy in the back pew who thinks a cheap disguise is the height of humor during a sermon. It's a beautiful, oddly specific rule designed to prevent a house of worship from turning into an open mic night. 12. Some laws sound like they were written by a surrealist painter. For instance, what could possibly lead the state of Arizona to legally forbid a donkey from sleeping in a bathtub? This wasn't a hypothetical problem. In the 1920s, a rancher owned a donkey that enjoyed napping in an old tub on his property. When a nearby dam broke, the resulting flood washed the donkey, still in the tub, miles down the valley. The rescue operation was so costly and difficult that lawmakers decided to ban the situation entirely, forever protecting the state from the threat of tub-bound flood-surfing donkeys. 13. Ever get so mad at customer service you wanted to let them have it? Well, in Maryland, you better watch your language if you're calling about your seafood. It is illegal to use profane language with an employee of an oyster packing house. This suggests a very specific and very angry history between the citizens and their shellfish providers. It makes you wonder what kind of oyster-related emergencies were unfolding that required such foul-mouthed fury and, eventually, legislative intervention. 14. Of all the head-scratching laws in this country, some are just perfectly, beautifully unexplainable. Minnesota presents us with a masterpiece of this genre. It is illegal to cross state lines with a duck on your head. This isn't a metaphor. It's not about chickens on your shoulder or geese in your luggage. The law is laser-focused on the intersection of state borders, waterfowl, and your scalp. There is no known backstory, leaving us to imagine a bizarre, hat-based bird smuggling ring that once plagued the upper Midwest. 15. Think you're a good fisherman? I mean, really good? Have you ever tried to catch one with a lasso? In Tennessee, not only is that a nearly impossible feat of cowboy-level skill, it's also highly illegal. This law feels like a personal attack on the most talented outdoorsman in the state. It prevents the creation of what would undoubtedly be the world's most entertaining and least successful fishing tournament. The state of Tennessee looked at the theoretical sport of fish roping and said, "No, we will not allow it." 16. What is beauty? It's a question poets and philosophers have pondered for centuries. In the town of Wilbur, Washington, it's a question the law has already answered, at least when it comes to horses. It is illegal to ride an ugly horse. This is perhaps the most subjective law in America. Who is the arbiter of equine aesthetics? Is there a handsome horse committee? Is there a fine for having a horse with a bad personality? It's a cruel, shallow piece of legislation that punishes horses for simply not being born fabulous enough for the streets of Wilbur. 17. Laws often reflect the prejudices of their time, and this one from New Mexico is a stark reminder. The state constitution technically forbids idiots from voting. This language, now recognized as deeply offensive, was common in the 19th century to disenfranchise people with mental disabilities. While federal laws have long since made this unenforceable, it remains in the state's founding document, a fossil of a less enlightened time. 18. That deeply satisfying slurp you make when enjoying a hot bowl of soup on a cold day? In New Jersey, that isn't the sound of contentment. It's the sound of a minor crime. An old ordinance makes it illegal to slurp your soup in public. In a state famous for its thousands of diners, this is a direct assault on the very soundtrack of comfort food. It forces the citizens of the Garden State into a silent, joyless consumption of their liquid meals, all in the name of a level of decorum that soup, by its nature, refuses to recognize. 19. Of all the strange laws we've found, this one from Wyoming might be the most baffling. It is illegal to take a picture of a rabbit between January and April without an official permit. Why? The reasoning is lost to time. Was it an early attempt at protecting rabbit privacy during their breeding season? Was it to stop some bizarre form of photographic poaching? We may never know, but the law remains, shrouded in mystery and protecting bunnies from the paparazzi. 20. Florida law gets incredibly specific about who can do what and when. For instance, are you an unmarried woman who enjoys the thrill of jumping out of a plane? Well, you better not be doing it on a Sunday. A married woman can parachute on the Sabbath without issue, but for a single lady, it's legally off-limits. This is a fossil from a bygone era, a time when a woman's marital status and the day of the week could conspire to create a scenario so scandalous it had to be forbidden by law. 21. Here's a law from Utah that's so broad it borders on the philosophical. It is illegal to cause a catastrophe. The law doesn't really define what that means. Did you burn the toast and set off the smoke alarm? You may have caused a minor catastrophe. Did you knock over a large display of soup cans at the grocery store? Definitely a catastrophe. It's the ultimate catch-all law, a legal tool so vague it could apply to almost any clumsy or unfortunate situation. 22. The Puritans left behind a legacy of, let's call it, intense social rules. In Massachusetts, you can still find echoes of this, like the old law stating you must have a full bath before going to bed. But it gets better. Another law from the same era forbids you from snoring unless all your bedroom windows and doors are securely locked. The logic was that your nocturnal noises were a public nuisance that had to be contained within your own walls. It paints a perfect picture of a time when personal hygiene was mandatory and your snoring was a threat to civil order. 23. Thinking of a romantic gesture for your sweetheart? In Idaho, you better be ready to prove your affection with sheer, overwhelming volume. A law still on the books makes it illegal for a man to give his beloved a box of candy weighing less than 50 pounds. A simple, elegant box of chocolates is an insult. You must express your love with a quantity of sugar that requires a team lift. One can only assume the state's dental association was a major proponent of this very demanding and potentially backbreaking standard for courtship. 24. Are you an angler in Oregon looking for a competitive edge? Well, whatever you do, don't reach for that can of Del Monte. It is illegal to use canned corn as bait when fishing for trout. Not worms, not lures, but specifically corn from a can. This rule is a hyper-specific regulation that leaves one wondering, what did canned corn ever do to the Fish and Game Commission of Oregon to deserve such specific legal scorn? 25. New York City may be a global fashion capital, but it also has some very strict rules about what you can't wear, especially when the sun goes down. Bizarrely, it is illegal to wear slippers in public after 10 Yuhan p.m. This likely dates back to old tenement laws designed to reduce noise, aimed at people clomping around in their apartments. But the specific wording creates a fantastic image of a late-night fashion police force, patrolling the sidewalks of Manhattan, ready to issue a citation for your flagrantly comfortable and illegal footwear. 26. What do you think is the biggest public nuisance in Vermont? Leaf peepers? Icy roads? According to at least one old law, the number one threat is giraffe-related vandalism. It is illegal in the Green Mountain State to tie a giraffe to a telephone pole. This law stands as a magnificent solution to a problem that has never, not once, occurred in the history of North America. It's a testament to a lawmaker with an incredible imagination and a deep-seated fear of long-necked mammals disrupting the telecommunications grid. 27. Here's a quick but important piece of public service advice for pet owners in Illinois. It is illegal to give a lit cigar to your cat, dog, or other domestic animal. Apparently, giving them an unlit one is still a legal gray area, though probably frowned upon at the dog park. This law exists because somewhere, at some point, someone looked at their golden retriever and thought, you know what Fido needs? A fine Cuban. 28. Ever wanted to have your palm read or your future told? You can do that in Pennsylvania, but there's a catch. It's illegal for a fortune teller to accept money for their services. They can predict your future, contact your great-aunt Mildred on the other side, or analyze your tea leaves. But they have to do it for the love of the craft. This law effectively makes mysticism a hobby, not a profession, proving that the real psychic power would be figuring out how to pay your rent under these conditions. 29. What's the worst reason to get married? A drunken dare has to be high on the list. In Delaware, they agree so strongly that they made it illegal to get married if the proposal was made in jest or on a dare. This suggests it happened so often that the state had to step in and save people from their own terrible, legally binding jokes. You can just picture the courtroom scene. Your Honor, my client only agreed to eternal matrimony as a goof. 30. We've all felt that panic, that moment when the engine sputters and you realize you pushed your luck too far with the gas tank. In most places, this results in embarrassment. In Youngstown, Ohio, it can result in a ticket. It is illegal to run out of gasoline within the city limits. This isn't a law about obstructing traffic. It's a law that penalizes poor planning. It's the city's way of looking at your stranded vehicle and saying, you did this to yourself and now you're going to pay a fine for it. 31. In a stunning display of dairy industry influence, it is technically illegal in Utah not to drink milk. While obviously unenforceable today, this old statute was part of a massive promotional push for the state's agricultural products. It stands as a monument to the power of Big Milk. The famous ad campaign asked, "Got milk?" In Utah, that wasn't a question. It was a thinly veiled legal expectation. 32. We all know there are certain words you can't say on television. But what about words that are illegal in just one town? Welcome to Jonesboro, Georgia, where it is against the law to say the phrase, "oh boy." The origins are murky, but the law is real. Was there a famously annoying local resident who overused the phrase to the point of public outcry? Or was it just a bizarre attempt to enforce a certain kind of Southern decorum? Either way, express your mild surprise with caution in Jonesboro. 33. Planning a night out in Baltimore? If it involves a trip to the movies, you'll have to leave your lion at home. It is illegal to take a lion to a movie theater in the city. A dog? Maybe. A cat and a carrier? Probably fine. But a full-grown apex predator is where the city of Baltimore draws the line. One can only imagine the chaotic scene that prompted this law. A lion roaring at the MGM logo, helping itself to the popcorn of the person in the next seat, and generally disrupting the cinematic experience for everyone. 34. This next one sounds like a law from a modern-day magic special, but it's over a century old. In the state of Washington, it's illegal to display a hypnotized person in a storefront window. This law was designed to combat the wave of stage hypnotists and hucksters in the late 19th and early 20th centuries who would use these mesmerizing window displays to lure customers into their shows or sell them snake oil. It was a legal defense against the captivating and potentially fraudulent power of public hypnosis. 35. Picture this. It's a warm summer night. You live in Pennsylvania, and you're looking for a cool place to sleep. You decide to take a nap on top of your refrigerator. Outdoors. If you do that, you're breaking the law. An old ordinance forbids sleeping on a refrigerator in the open air. The fact that this specific act had to be outlawed suggests that, at some point, Enough people were doing it to become a legitimate problem. 36. The city of Chicago is famous for its resilience, its stunning architecture, and its world-class food scene. It is also apparently home to people so dedicated to finishing their meal that they had to make a law about it. In Chicago, it is illegal to eat in a place that is on fire. This isn't just common sense. It's a city ordinance. It paints a picture of a diner so determined to finish his deep dish pizza that he's willing to ignore the flames, the smoke, and the sirens, forcing the city to legally command him to evacuate. 37. Here's a law that feels like it was lifted directly from a 1950s sitcom. In California, it is illegal for a woman to drive a car while wearing a housecoat, also known as a dressing gown. A man in a bathrobe? Presumably, that's perfectly fine. This relic from a bygone era saw a woman's comfortable morning attire as a unique and specific danger to public safety on the road, a threat so severe that the state legislature had to intervene. 38. Are you a fan of artisanal, locally sourced ingredients? If you're in New Hampshire, make sure you do your foraging during the day. An old law makes it illegal to collect seaweed from the beach at night. What nefarious, underhanded activities were being conducted with illicitly gathered kelp under the cover of darkness? Was there a black market for nocturnal nori? The world may never know, but the law remains, protecting the coastline from after-hours seaweed thieves. 39. Before you decide to take a baseball bat to your old, malfunctioning radio in a fit of cathartic rage, you should know that if you're in Detroit, that's technically illegal. A city ordinance forbids the willful destruction of a radio. This wasn't to protect the radio's feelings. It was a Cold War-era civil defense measure. The law was intended to ensure that, in an emergency, every household would still have a way to receive broadcasts and instructions. It's a dumb-sounding law with a surprisingly smart, if outdated, purpose. 40. Florida is a state that is essentially one giant, chaotic beach party, which is why this next law is so wonderfully hypocritical. It is illegal to sing in a public place while wearing a swimsuit. You can be in a swimsuit. You can be singing. But you cannot, under any circumstances, do both at the same time. This law effectively shuts down any chance of an impromptu beachside musical number. It's as if the state looked at its own reflection and said, "Okay, that's enough fun for one day." 41. How do you protect the sanctity of an official state symbol? In Louisiana, you do it with the threat of legal action. It is illegal to tell a crawfish a joke. This is part of a broader law protecting the state's official crustacean from being unduly harassed. The implication is that a really bad pun could cause a crawfish emotional distress, which is a hilarious concept. It's a law that gives more legal protection to a small, freshwater lobster than some humans have in other parts of the world. 42. In North Carolina, there's a law that sounds like it was written by a disgruntled event planner. Organizations are forbidden from holding meetings if the members are all in costume. So that annual Star Trek fan club meeting where everyone shows up in uniform? Technically illegal. The secret society of historical reenactors? Better meet in street clothes. It's a strange and oddly specific rule that targets the very heart of enthusiast conventions and themed gatherings. 43. If you've ever looked at a map of North and South Dakota, you may have noticed the perfectly straight line that separates them. What you might not know is that for a brief, glorious period, it was illegal to explode a firecracker on that border. A joint resolution from both states in the 19th century banned the practice. Was there an ongoing pyrotechnic war between the two Dakotas? Was this a common form of border dispute settlement? The history is lost, but the image of a bi-state fireworks ban remains. 44. Most people agree that bingo is a relatively harmless pastime. The state of North Carolina, however, respectfully disagrees. A law there states that a single session of bingo cannot last longer than 5 hours. This isn't just a suggestion, it's a legal limit. It implies the existence of marathon, multi-day bingo sessions so intense and grueling that the government had to step in and force people to go home. It's a law designed to prevent you from dying of old age while waiting for someone to call B12. 45. Let's travel to the picturesque streets of Carmel, California, a town so protective of its aesthetic that it has legislated footwear. It is illegal to wear high heels with a base of less than 1 square inch without a special permit from City Hall. This isn't about fashion, it's about liability. The city's streets are famously uneven with charming but treacherous tree roots. To avoid lawsuits from people tripping, they just made the shoes illegal. You have to literally apply for a license to be stylishly unstable. 46. In Hawaii, a state literally made of islands surrounded by water, there is an old law in the books that forbids you from putting coins in your ears. This isn't an anti-earring law. It seems to be a very specific prohibition against using your ear canals as a personal piggy bank. Was this a common magic trick that went horribly wrong one too many times? Or was it to prevent people from confusing their own heads with a jukebox? It's a wonderfully weird and pointless piece of Pacific legal history. 47. What's the most specific and pointless traffic law you can imagine? I submit for your consideration a law from the city of Dublin, Georgia. It is illegal to drive your car through a public park or playground. Okay, that makes sense. But the law gets more specific. It doesn't apply to baseball fields or football stadiums. It's a law that says, stay off the slides, but feel free to do donuts on the pitcher's mound. 48. In Connecticut, if you're a beekeeper, you better be a good citizen. It's illegal for anyone who is unsuitable to handle bees to own them. This is delightfully vague. What makes someone unsuitable? Do they have a bad attitude? Are they rude to the queen? Is there a personality test for aspiring apiarists? It's a law that judges not your skill but your very character as a prerequisite for entering the world of honey production. 49. The state of Maine takes its advertising laws very, very seriously. For a long time, it was illegal to have any billboards on the side of the road. But they took it one step further. It was also illegal to bite your landlord. While obviously a good piece of general life advice, the fact that it needed to be a specific law suggests a history of tenant-landlord disputes in Maine escalating to a very primal level. It's a law that says, pay your rent on time, and please, don't resort to cannibalism. And so we've seen it all, from drunk fish to outlawed slippers, from cowboy boot licenses to a war on ugly horses. These laws are more than just funny relics. They are a bizarre, hilarious X-ray of American history, capturing the strange anxieties, weird obsessions, and glorious moments of absurdity that have defined the country for centuries. They remind us that even the most serious systems have a little room for pure, unadulterated nonsense. So, what's the dumbest law you've ever heard of, whether it's from this list or your own hometown? We'd love to read about it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into legislative madness, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell for more stories you won't believe are true. 50. We end our journey with a law that attacks not a crime, not a public nuisance, but a fundamental aspect of human insecurity. In the state of Washington, it is illegal for a person to knowingly and willfully pretend that their parents are rich. This isn't about fraud or trying to get a loan. This is a law that literally makes it a misdemeanor to be a poser. It legislates against social climbing. Imagine a world where you could be fined for telling a date that your father owns a yacht when, in reality, he just has a very nice fishing boat. It's the ultimate legal weapon against phoniness, a state-sanctioned punishment for faking it till you make it, and a perfectly absurd ending to our tour of laws that tried to regulate every strange corner of human behavior. Okay, we've covered 49 points of pure legislative gold, and there's just one left to go. But before we get to our final exhibit, it's time for the final verdict. In our opinion, the award for the most unbelievable law on today's list goes to Arizona's ban on letting a donkey sleep in a bathtub. Why? Because it's not just a random weird rule. It's a legislative scar left by a single, absurd, real-life event. It's a law born from a flash flood, a floating bathtub, and one very confused donkey whose nap turned into a nautical adventure. It perfectly proves how one bizarre incident can be immortalized forever in the legal code as a warning to all future bath-loving farm animals. Do you agree with our verdict? Or did another law deserve this dubious honor? Let us know what you think in the comments. And now, for our closing argument.